The health of the corporate India can be described in broadly two words. I would say leverage and demand. If I were just to focus on leverage, post FY 9-10, that's when the government started providing a fiscal stimulus. A lot of corporates started getting into a capital expenditure mode, believing that the demand that was visible at that stage was sustainable over the next 4 to 5 years. But thereafter, what you saw was clearly some amount of demand slowdown, which kind of played out both in the domestic market as well as in the international markets. So there was a revenue growth which was playing out over the last 3 to 4 years, but that revenue growth was primarily driven by giving more and more credit to customers, so which means working capital continued to increase. The corporates ended up with a leverage which was almost at its peak in FY14. We've been looking at the FY15 data and collating as and when the balance sheets are coming through, and our sense is probably that number is going to be a bit worse off than what it was in FY14. So clearly, in terms of leverage, corporate India is probably at its worst at this moment. I think the challenge is where is demand. If I were to break it up into its three major components, you clearly have exports, which are slowing down significantly. That's what we have seen in the last few months. So that's a pillar which is not necessarily going to provide any significant support to demand, at least in the short to medium term. You are probably not seeing a kind of pickup in the rural demand per se, which has also come off quite significantly. What you're seeing positive signs at this moment is clearly in the urban consumption market, and that's a reflection of what you're seeing, the inflation pressures playing out and the consumer probably having a bit more discretionary income available to spend on consumer goods as well as on the non-consumer goods side as well. What we saw about 2 years back and what we are looking today, I think corporates today are probably much less vulnerable. When I say much less vulnerable, at least there does not seem to be a deterioration that's as fast as what it was, say, about 2 years back. So clearly that's definitely showing signs of bottoming out. And the other is in terms of the distinction. So you have the two sets of corporates that one typically looks at. So when the median leverage looks high, there is a set of corporates who are fairly under leveraged as well. Not a significant number. So out of the top 500 borrowers, there are about 180 corporates who we think are reasonably under leveraged, can kind of incur the next level of capital expenditure. But there are about 200 of those 500 who are either stressed or probably close to being stressed. Reading is probably in FY16 as well. As we go along during the course of this year, we would see probably leverage still continuing to remain high. So I think clearly leverage is a challenge for corporate India today. I would try to break this leverage into two parts. When you look at the top 500 borrowers, where we're talking about leverage at a median level, there are the set of corporates who are fairly highly leveraged, especially in sectors like construction, infrastructure and metals and mining. But there are a lot of corporates who are under leveraged as well. So there is a two-side kind of story which is playing out on the leverage side. And if I were to also look at how these corporates have been panning out over the last few years, clearly in terms of vulnerability as far as performance is concerned, that seems to be coming off. Bottoming out perspective, we have probably reached the bottom, and the downside risk at this moment remain fairly minimal. Does it mean that this is a clear sign of a sharp recovery that we are foreseeing? Probably not, and probably not at this stage.